Lawmakers on Capitol Hill did not miss out on the economic boom of 2021. Members of Congress bought and sold an estimated $355 million worth of stocks last year, according to a newly released study by MarketWatch. U.S. representatives and senators or their immediate family bought around $180 million and sold around $175 million worth of company shares in 2021. Topping the list is Texas Congressman Michael McCall with about $66 million in transactions, and California Representative Ro Khanna with about $53 million in transactions. Nancy Pelosi came in eighth with $12 million in transactions, all buys and no sells for the Speaker in 2021. Stock trading by members of Congress has faced scrutiny over the years. Questions exist over whether lawmakers are using privileged information for an unfair advantage. FBI Director Christopher Wray says that the threat from the Chinese Communist regime is more brazen and damaging than ever before. On Monday, Wray told an audience at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation that the Chinese regime steals, quote, staggering volumes of information and causes deep, job-destroying damage across a wide range of industries. He said no other country poses a bigger threat to America's innovation and economic security due to theft of information and technology.
I do want to be clear that the Chinese government and the Chinese Communist Party pose the threat we're focused on countering, not the Chinese people and certainly not Chinese Americans who are themselves frequently victims of the Chinese government's lawless aggression.
He said the threat to the West from the Chinese regime is more brazen and damaging than ever before. Lawmakers from both sides of the aisle are unified in recognizing the serious threat China poses to human rights and America's economy. Congress this week is gearing up to pass a bill meant to hold the Chinese Communist Party accountable for its human rights abuses. But one Republican wants to go even further. Representative Steve Chabot of Ohio today proposed levying sanctions to prevent forced organ harvesting from Falun Dafa practitioners. And Senator John Tester tells NTD he's expecting the bill to pass after a genuine bipartisan discussion on this critical issue. NTD's Melina Wisecup has more.
The House this week is starting work on a new competition bill meant to boost American innovation and help us with global competitiveness, particularly competition with China. The Senate already passed their version of the bill, and now senators are pushing House Speaker Nancy Pelosi to move quickly to get it done. On Tuesday, Senator Raphael Warnock sent a letter to Speaker Pelosi, writing that the effort will increase resilience in America's supply chains while decreasing resilience on other countries. The House today getting started.
I think the subject of today's hearing is such that we can move together in a process that we haven't seen much lately.
And it goes further than economic initiatives. It takes action to address human rights. It would impose sanctions for human rights abuses of Uyghurs in Xinjiang. But one Republican representative is pushing for more.
To levying sanctions for involuntary organ harvesting from the Falun Gong.
Falun Gong is a spiritual practice that has faced brutal persecution in China since 1999. And Chabot hopes this new bill will provide the occasion to consider stronger actions to hold the CCP accountable for its human rights atrocities.
Tough policies like these ought to be included.
The Competes bill also invests money into Hong Kong, $10 million to promote democracy. Unlike the Senate version of the bill, the Competes Act invests in climate change.
Melina, there's been some pushback from Republicans on this bill because they say it isn't strong enough. Representative Jim Banks said that this bill concedes to China instead of standing up to them. So, Melina, what's this pushback all about?
Well, some Republicans are concerned that this bill doesn't go far enough to crack down on agents of the Chinese Communist Party who are involved with stealing American intellectual property. And we know that has been an ongoing issue in our universities. I spoke with Senator John Tester earlier, a Democrat senator, who said that this is an issue that does need to be addressed and taken care of, but he's not picky about where it's addressed. Here's some of that exchange.
Yes, I think it's very relevant.
You think it should be in this bill?
I am not a stickler for turf. If we can get it addressed, if it has to be addressed in this bill, go ahead and do it.
And the House version of the bill is expected to pass quickly in the Democrat-controlled House, and then it will have to be reconciled with the Senate version. Democrats are really hoping this process will move quickly so that Biden will have an accomplishment to speak about at his State of the Union address come March 1st. Steve, back to you.
Thanks for that, Melina. A group of Senate Democrats released a draft of their legislation to reform an 1887 election law that was highlighted in the wake of the 2020 election. The bill, named the Electoral Count Modernization Act, is drafted by Senators Angus King, Amy Klobuchar, and Dick Durbin. The senators said the bill serves as a foundational outline for key reforms to update the 1887 law. It aims to clarify that the Vice President's role is ceremonial in overseeing the formal counting of the Electoral College vote. The proposal comes in response to the 2020 election and the question of whether a Vice President had the power to overturn election results. But some experts argue that the original Electoral Count Act already implies the ceremonial nature of the Vice President's role, and that Mike Pence did not have the power to overturn the 2020 election had he attempted to. Right now, another bipartisan group led by Senators Susan Collins and Joe Manchin are working on their own proposal to reform the Electoral Count Act. With companies and schools dropping the vaccine mandate, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin just reaffirmed the mandate for the military, including the National Guard. Secretary Austin dismissed 7 Republican governors' objections to the National Guard vaccine mandate. Austin wrote in a letter that governors' concerns do not negate the need for the important military readiness requirement. Governors of these 7 states publicly opposed the mandate in December. The governors of Texas and Alaska also filed suit against the National Guard vaccine mandate. So far, more than 500 U.S. active duty service members have been discharged over the vaccine mandates. Recently, I had an interview with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. about these vaccine mandates. Kennedy is an attorney and son of the United States Senator Robert F. Kennedy and the nephew of President John F. Kennedy. Let's take a look.
What's happening in our country, the cruelty of the mandates, the irrationality of the mandates, the violation of all of our traditional values in this country, and ultimately our humanity. Now, that doesn't mean that, vaccines are always worthless, but what it means is you have to carefully assess the risk from the disease and the risk from the vaccine, and you have to make a cost-benefit analysis, and that is really the basic problem here. There was never any scientific citation. There was never any democratic process of PCR tests using them at amplifications 3 or 4 times what they should have been used at, or more. We saw manipulation of death certificates. All of these things to exaggerate fears of the illness, and then to minimize public knowledge about the risk from vaccination.
On Friday, Virginia Attorney General Jason Miyares issued a legal opinion that state colleges and universities could not mandate COVID-19 vaccines for student enrollment. He added that the Virginia Assembly could pass a law requiring the vaccine, but it has not done so. University of Virginia, Virginia Tech, and George Mason have dropped their mandates. The George Mason website reads, quote, "We will now strongly encourage vaccination protocols for all Mason students, faculty, and staff, though we no longer require them." Back in July, a George Mason newsletter had stated that students would incur a late fee for not submitting their vaccination cards on time. It additionally stated non-compliance could result in a referral to student conduct. Mason's dropping the mandate represents a big shift from their previous policy. Washington, D.C. released local guidelines which ask those isolating for COVID-19 to have a negative test result before ending quarantine. On a call with D.C. council members, local city officials remarked that the guidance is stricter than those issued by the CDC, which only asks for 5 full days of isolation. D.C.'s guidance also states that individuals should continue to wear masks around others for an additional 5 days, even after a negative COVID-19 antigen test. The The guidance says that a negative COVID-19 test is not a guarantee that you are, quote, not infectious to others, so continuing to wear a mask is essential, end quote.